Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Bible in Life podcast. My name is John Whitaker, and I am the creator of the Bible in Life, as well as some other online Bible teaching resources. And over the last few weeks, my friend Stephen and I have just been exploring this whole idea of rewards. And when the Bible talks about crowns or rewards and what do we have to look forward to in heaven, what exactly are we talking about? And how does that fit in with everything else we believe? And one of the topics that regularly comes up in this discussion of rewards is this idea of, are there degrees of rewards? Do some people get bigger rewards and some lesser rewards? And if so, how does that fit in with other things that the New Testament teaches by way of salvation and theology? And so on this episode, Stephen and I want to just really explore that idea. And part of the reason that idea comes up is because of passages like a parable that we find in Luke chapter 19. Luke 19, verse 11 and following, we find this parable of Jesus, typically called the parable of the minas. And in short, in the parable, there's this wealthy ruler, landowner who has servants, and he goes away on a journey. Before he goes, he gives each of his servants various tasks to do. And then after his journey, he comes back and he checks in. Were they successful in the tasks they were entrusted with? And one guy was so successful with his task that he gets rewarded with oversight of 10 cities. Another guy was successful in his task. He gets oversight of 5 cities. And notice the difference, 10 and 5. One guy isn't successful at all. He doesn't get oversight of anything whatsoever. And the contrast between, oh, you get 10 cities, you get 5 cities, has suggested to some people this idea that there are degrees of rewards in heaven that people will be given based on their service and their faithfulness to Jesus. And so we want to explore that idea today. And I want to hand it off before we look at any more scripture to Stephen, because Stephen's been reading an interesting book that has his own thoughts and his own take on this as well. So, Stephen, why don't you give us a little insight into what you've been reading here?
Sure. Good to chat with you again, John.
Yeah, welcome back to the podcast. So,
Yeah, thanks. I've been reading a book called In Light of Eternity by Randy Alcorn. And for those of you familiar with Randy, this book was a precursor to his big book called Heaven.
this book came out before it.
Quite a bit before. This came out in 1999, and I think Heaven came out in 2007 or something like that.
Okay.
So I think it's got a few years on it. It's pretty small. It's like 150 pages versus his big Heaven book, which is probably 400 pages.
Yeah.
But it's kind of his thoughts on the summary of scripture about eternity and living in light of eternity, which is why it's called that. But I pulled it out when we started talking about rewards in heaven, and this topic we're talking about today about degrees. Randy is a big proponent of degrees. He mentions some of these parables where certain workers are rewarded more, like you mentioned, and certain ones are rewarded less. And he seems to take those as pretty literal implications for what life in heaven would be like, including other passages where it talks about reigning. And he says that he believes that reigning implies that you're in charge of things and you're delegating things, and in order to do that, you'd have to kind of be over other people.
Right.
So yeah, he's a definite proponent of this idea. But what's kind of interesting is that the rewards he's talking about are kind of all responsibilities as well.
Yeah.
And so I I'm not sure what you think. What's your thoughts on that? Like
Yeah.
the rewards, just more responsibility in heaven.
Yeah, yeah. and, and if so, that doesn't feel like much of a reward, does it? What? I worked hard all this time and now I just have more responsibility going forward. Um, yeah, I think we can reflect on that idea of rewards as responsibility, because I do think you see that in some of these parables. And even just the whole idea of degrees. Earlier on in my preaching and my teaching, I was pretty settled on the idea of degrees of reward. And yet, the more I've studied, the more I've thought, the more I've read from other people, I've realized there's more of a debate about it than maybe I realized, 20 years ago when I was earlier on in my teaching and my preaching. And in fact, there's a really thoroughgoing article by a well-known New Testament scholar named Craig Blomberg. You could Google it and you could find the article. If you just Google Craig Blomberg degrees of reward, you'll find the article. And he's a well-known New Testament scholar, taught at Denver Seminary for a long time. I think he still teaches, at least to some degree there. And he argues um, strongly against the idea of degrees of reward.
Hmm.
Um, and it may have been his article that when I first read that 10, 15 years ago, that got me thinking, okay, so maybe I need to go back to the drawing board and rethink some of this, and uh, but I get it. I get the debate. Okay, if we're saved by grace, how does that square with you get more than this person, right? Like, well, if this person's saved by grace and you're saved by grace, why is it that you get a bigger reward and they get a lesser reward, right? Maybe they get a small little house and you get a mansion, or what are we talking about, right? Like, I get that
Yep.
debate. How does the idea of degrees of reward square with being saved by grace? But then on the other hand, you have that teaching clearly in the New Testament, right? We're all saved by grace. But then you get passages in the teaching of the apostles that talk about, well, God's going to repay to every person according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Second
Hmm.
Corinthians 5:10. That's very clear, that where Paul says we'll all stand before the judgment seat of Jesus and will be repaid for the deeds done in the body, whether good or bad. So we're saved by grace, but then Paul says we're going to somehow be evaluated and somehow judged, right? Somehow evaluated based on what we've done. He
Right.
mentions everybody. Or you even see the same thing in Revelation 22, where people are going to be evaluated based on what they've done. And um, so degrees of reward, saved by grace, judged by works. Like, what are we talking about, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
and I've wrestled with that. In fact, I had a professor when I was in Bible college, and that was very much the way he expressed it was, well, we're saved by grace, but we're going to be judged by works. And I said, well, how does that work, right? Get that tension. Uh, then you get other parables. So you have the parable like Luke 19 that I mentioned that really seems to suggest, okay, there are differences, 10 versus 5, right? But you get other parables like the one in Matthew 20, where in the parable that Jesus tells, the foreman goes out and he hires workers at the beginning of the workday, like 6 in the morning from the town square, puts them to work in his field, says you'll get a denarius, and then 3 hours later he goes back to town squares. He gets more workers, and up until the last hour of the day, and he hires some workers at the very last hour. And when he pays them, he starts with those that work the least, and they all get the exact same amount. They all get a denarius, whether they work for an hour or whether they work for 12 hours. Well, that sounds like they're all equal. So all of that has suggested that, oh, maybe it's not as clear cut as I once thought. Maybe it's not as clear cut as Andy or Randy Alcorn makes it seem like it is, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, so are there degrees of reward or not? And there seems to be some debate about that.
Yeah. Um, there's some. Well, do you want to see a couple citations from Randy where he
Yeah, yeah,
pulls some of
yeah.
this? Um, 1 Corinthians 4:2 He says, God promises to grant you rewards in light of your faithfulness and good motives. That's one of the passages he cites there.
1 Corinthians 4:2.
Yeah.
All right.
4:2 and verse 5 as well.
Okay. So 1 Corinthians 4:2 says it's required of stewards, managers, that they be found trustworthy. That's what it says.
Okay, what about verse 5?
And then verse 5, let's see, where does verse 5 pick up? Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light things now hidden in the darkness and will disclose the purposes of the heart. Then each one will receive his commendation from God. So perhaps degrees are implied in that commendation. Each one's going to get their own unique commendation from God, whatever that might be, based on how trustworthy they are, I suppose. I'm guessing that's where Randy's going with that. Although I would say a text like that isn't explicit and certainly doesn't require the idea of degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know there's multiple places where scripture says that you would be rewarded for the good that you do, basically.
Yeah.
Said lots of different ways. So yeah, it's a real interesting topic, and I don't know if like how important it is to land on, a theology about it.
Yeah. I appreciate Craig Bromberg's concern of if we teach degrees of reward, it seems like in some way we're compromising salvation by grace. I appreciate that concern. I'm just not 100% sold that concern is actually legitimate, right? Because the reward will fit the person, it seems like. Now, the two primary texts that I've used in the past that I've seen other people use to support degrees of reward are the Luke 19, the parable of the minas, where when the master comes back, what he promised, what it basically does is he evaluates the guy's work. You were entrusted with 10 minas. What did you do with these 10 minas? Oh, you were faithful with those 10 minas. You're going to be in charge of 10 cities. Oh, you were faithful with 5 minas. You're going to be in charge with 5 cities. Clearly, there's degrees, 10, 5, right? So there's that one. The other one is the parable of the talents in Matthew 25.
Yeah.
It picks up in verse 14. It's the same sort of idea. The master entrusts his servants before he goes away with various amounts of talents. And a talent was not a talent like we mean talent where you have a particular skill set. A talent was a bag of money.
Right.
So this guy gets so much money, use it for the master's agenda and purposes. This guy gets a different amount of money, use it for the master's purposes. And then when the master comes back, he does the same sort of thing. He evaluates, how did you use the talents I entrusted to you, the money that I entrusted to you? Oh, you were faithful. Well, then you're going to get 10 more talents. Oh, you were faithful with the 5 talents. Oh, you get 5 more talents. Oh, you weren't faithful at all. Then your 1 talent's going to be taken away from you and given to the guy who I just gave it an extra 10. So now he has 21, right? And both Luke 19 and Matthew 25 does seem to suggest this idea of, based on your faithfulness in whatever has been entrusted to you, there's going to be an appropriate evaluation and reward, if you will, out of that. So it's those two passages that, in the past when I've taught this, that I've said, okay, that to me seems pretty clear that there's some sort of degrees of reward. Challenge is they're parables. And it's really hard to take a parable and make it, like it's a story to make a particular point. Do we press all the details of the parable to make a point that the parable wasn't making?
Right.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yep.
In both those parables, the primary point is being faithful with what you're entrusted by the master. That's the primary point. So did Jesus intend in those parables to also say, because if you are faithful, I'm going to give you X number of opportunities and responsibilities, and you're going to get even more if you're faithful with that. Did he intend that or not? And I'm less confident now than I used to be that he did.
Interesting.
um,
I think I fall more on the other side, not nearly as studied in this as you are. Um, I guess for me, jeopardizing the idea of being saved by grace through faith doesn't fall into this argument for me in my head.
yeah, yeah,
Which I think we've said on one of our previous episodes about like heaven is the gift
right,
of God. And then anything beyond that, in heaven, if there's no jealousy and there's no envy, there's no, all those sinful parts of us are gone.
right.
Um, I think having degrees, people having different responsibilities or even kind of reigning over others is not,
Not
I
an
don't
issue.
think it's a non-issue for me as far as salvation. Um, and
Yeah,
it makes sense to me that because there's definitely degrees of faithfulness in the here and now. That's
yep.
for sure.
No, and that's what you said, I think is really important. And obviously Randy Alcorn hits this in his book, but when you do look at Luke 19, the reward in that is being in charge of 10 cities, being in charge of 5 cities. And I'm guessing that's where Randy gets the idea of responsibilities, right? Like there's a responsibility that comes with that. So here's here's sort of where I've emerged in my thinking about this is your faithfulness evidences a transformation of character where you can be entrusted with the master's things to a certain degree that maybe now he knows, okay, because you've been faithful in a few things, Luke 19, that parable, I can entrust you with more things. And so I I think we have to be careful, I guess, in how we think about rewards. That there is this sense of, as Dallas Willard has said, that right now we're training for reigning, right? Like all our
Hmm.
discipleship to Jesus, all our character formation is training us to become the kind of people who can actually reign over the new earth the way humans were supposed to in the very beginning, but we messed it all up in breaking faith with our creator.
Yeah.
And so our trustworthiness and our character formation puts us in a position where Jesus can hand us certain tasks, responsibilities in the new earth, whatever that might be, and knows that they're in good hands because we become the kind of person who can handle.
Yep.
That makes sense to me. Then
Yeah.
that seems to be in keeping with what's said in Luke 19 as well as in other places in the New Testament.
Yeah. I think so too. And it settles with me better. It makes sense. Um, and the parent-child relationship is like used all throughout scripture. And I feel like that's a pretty safe translation for how we would treat our kids. Um, that's how we treat our kids when
Yeah.
they show us
You've been
responsibility,
faithful
they
in,
show us
in this, so
maturity.
now I know I can trust you with that. Yeah.
Yeah. We love
Yeah.
them all the same,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean some get to earn other things and nicer things because they have shown that they can handle it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so whatever way the rewards exactly play out, it's I do think in some regard it is going to be based on the kind of character we have acquired this side of glory. And maybe there'll be opportunities to deepen our character in the new earth. And with that can be even growth.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past,
Yep.
whatever's coming, right? So,
Yep.
um, but the reward fits the character. And that really, I think, is the primary point of Luke 19 and Matthew 25. Whatever the reward is, it's based on your character can handle this. You've shown that. You've demonstrated that. So I know because you were faithful in this thing I gave you, I know I can trust you giving you more.
Yep.
So the reward is entrusted to the character. And that's why I don't think we should think of rewards maybe, how do I want to say this? We should think of the persons who get certain kinds of rewards differently than the way we might think of it by earthly standards.
Yeah. That's a good
Like,
distinction.
yeah, like, okay, just because I've been a preacher and a Bible teacher, right? And someone else has been a janitor at a corporation, right? Doesn't mean automatically I'm going to get more rewards than him.
Right.
Because his character may have been so formed into Christ likeness. Jesus knows I can actually I can hand you more than I could hand John because of who you've become in me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think we need to be careful of, okay, let's not assume, oh, the people doing really spiritual work, they're going to get the big rewards, and the rest of us will be junior lackeys in the world to come. It has more to do with, is your character like Jesus's so that he can trust you with his things to do what he wants in the world to
Yep.
come?
Yeah. Well, I think that brings up, a good topic for future discussion of like why would he tell us about the rewards to begin with, if not to motivate us in some way?
Yeah.
So maybe that'd be a good topic for future discussion, is, the motivation behind it, what that's for, and how that can help us.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll take that up in our the next episode. We'll just pick up at that point, and we will have a conversation about what really is the benefit of knowing that there are rewards to come, and the
Yeah,
motivation
sounds
that it
great.
should lead to. So great. Well, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Bible and Life podcast. As always, the Bible and Life podcast, the listener's commentary, some of the other things I do online are all made possible because of the generosity of dozens and dozens of people just like you. So from the bottom of my heart, let me just say thanks a ton. God is bearing good fruit in the lives of people all around the world because of your generosity. So thank you so much. And if you've been blessed or impacted by this ministry, could I invite you to prayerfully consider joining the team of supporters? You can do so by going to johnwhitaker.net. Click the Give button. It'll redirect you to a page through World Family Mission, a registered nonprofit, where you could set up a one-time or a recurring monthly donation. So thanks in advance for your support.